Well, welcome again to Climate Adaptation. We are going to be hearing from Katie Black with the University of Minnesota Extension and Lizzie Dawson, who is with our Minnesota's Natural Resource, NRCS, Natural Resource Services. Anyway, before we begin, I want to introduce myself, Burke Murphy. I'm the state coordinator of Minnesota Women in Conservation, and I'm here with my colleague, Noreen Thomas, who is a regional coordinator of MNWiC for the Northwest region, but a champion across the board for women in conservation. First, I would like to share my screen and introduce you briefly to this initiative. And Noreen, you can see the screen.
Yep, everything's okay.
Here we go. Thank you. So, okay, let's move forward. And there we go. MNWiC is an initiative that has been started by Renewing the Countryside, which has been in the field for over 20 years, supporting and connecting stewards of the land and farms with necessary resources. We also want to acknowledge and thank the Natural Resource Conservation Services for funding MNWiC, and thank you to our Minnesota branch who support us. Briefly, this is some of the a reflection of some of the ways in which Renewing the Countryside is deeply engaged in agriculture and land stewardship, from farmers market hubs to Go Farm Connect and land access, and then many conservation connections. The reason MNWiC matters is because across the state of Minnesota, women are producing on over 9 million acres of farmland. And as recent as 2022, 35,623 women identified themselves as being in farming, and 19,000 separately identified as non-operating land stewards. Briefly, you can see here that the female farmers are involved in every type of farming. Our objectives with this initiative are to welcome all women in agriculture and land stewardship, to increase women's knowledge, understanding, and use of conservation and NRCS programs in particular. We are here to shepherd women through the process of program assistance and ultimately building a lasting legacy of relationships and regional networks. We have a MNWiC team of 10 women that are working together to deliver this initiative across the state. And I have to admit someone here. And if you would go to our website, you will find the regional coordinator from your region. But briefly, we have a North Central for Aiken and Itasca. We have Upper Minnesota Valley region, which we call West Central, and Lackaparle, Chippewa, and Swift. Noreen Thomas from Clay and Norman and Wilkin in the Northwest. And you can see from the data that there's a profound number of women producing on many, many acres. Here we go. And Maddy Bartsch for the Southeast region for Goodhue, Rice, and Dakota, where there is the highest concentration of small and medium-sized farms.
Hey,
our goal.
Stop it.
Hello. Okay. Our goal is to equip women to implement conservation practices. We certainly want to increase your knowledge and understanding, but we also really want to help you through the process of implementation. The way we reach you is through potlucks, webinars, field days, and learning circles. Here is a graph that captures the participation rate as of the end of August, that almost 60% of the women showing up for our events, in person and virtual, are landowners. 18.9% are beginning farmers, and that's exciting to us because this piece of the pie is growing, as is this part. 5.4% are renting land to farm, and there's 27% of us who are, in fact, supporters of agriculture and conservation. This is a map that reflects the outreach and engagement just since January, and it's really phenomenal. 994 contacts have been made, and that's what's reflected on the state map. And 224 women have self-identified as being historically underserved. So help us turn the whole state green. We'd love that. Here's a snapshot you've seen before, but it is exciting because this is one of our first learning circles last December, and we're looking forward to hosting learning circles in every region this December. Here's some more recent quotes from our evaluations at in-person events. Lots of good info on NRCS. Wonderful group of women sharing goals. So many more resources than I realized. Spending time with folks who have similar interest in conservation and agriculture, we like, and we have so much potential together, which I would agree. And here's a wonderful picture celebrating our very own Noreen Thomas, who was a finalist for Women Farmer of the Year at Farm Fest. So please join us every Wednesday for our Welcoming Wednesday webinars this coming October. You will go to our website and find the registration for beekeeping for our October webinar. There we go. Now I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to ask our guest speaker, Katie Black, to please begin to set up. And if you just give me a second, Katie, I am going to pull up. My goodness, where is this? Sorry. I want to introduce you properly. And sorry, just here we go. So Katie Black specializes in understanding and helping farmers adapt to changing weather patterns through presentations, research, and programming. She has earned a Master's of Science in Applied Plant Science from the University of Minnesota and worked on educating young people about conservation and food systems prior to graduate school. She's learned about agriculture and food systems in places as close as her family's farm in North Dakota and as far away as southern India. One of her quotes is that changes to our climate and weather patterns can create feelings of uncertainty, stress, and more. I'm sure you would all agree. But preparing for these changes and engaging in long-term planning can build stronger, more resilient communities and farms. So thank you, Katie, for joining us. We're really delighted to hear what you're going to introduce us to. Thank you.
Thanks so much for introducing me, Burke, and hello, good afternoon, everybody. It's so nice to be with you. I am really fond and really respect the work that MNWiC does, and so I'm really honored to be here today. And I was just thinking about how relationships are a form of resilience, so I'm very happy to be in community with all of you today. So again, we're going to be talking about climate adaptation and really how we can plan for changing conditions. The focus of my talk is about changing weather conditions, but I think that the lessons that we talk about later on in my presentation that we've applied to really all sorts of change. I'm going to speak for the first half of the presentation, and then we'll have Lucy Dawson talk about some NRCS resources as they relate to resilience. And I will tell people that the first time we're talking about changing and extreme weather patterns can feel a bit overwhelming, and rightfully so, but I would like for you to think of this afternoon as really perhaps the start of thinking about your climate adaptation journey. It's a long process. It requires time and planning, obviously. And so I'm encouraging you to just think about where you are on your journey, and I'm hoping this presentation will meet you there. I'm going to move through my slides, and then we will have time for questions at the end. But if you have a burning question that arises about a particular slide, please feel free to drop it in the chat so that I can get to it later. So for my portion of the talk, we're going to be talking about changing weather patterns, what we have been experiencing thus far, and what trends we expect to continue in the future. We'll talk a bit about what we can do to prepare for certain weather and climate related risks, And we'll talk about resources that can help us move towards planning for resilience. And as I begin my talk, you can feel free to pop it in the chat or just reflect on your own. But I'm asking you to think about, what are some of the weather and climate related challenges you've noticed increasing over time? Maybe since you started your farming career versus now, or if you've noticed things sort of coming up repeatedly over the past couple growing seasons. Just think about what some of those challenges have been as we move into talking about what we have been seeing in terms of trends in Minnesota over time. And hopefully we can corroborate some of what you've been seeing in your own experiences. All right, so if we are talking about changing weather patterns, I always like to start with sort of a long-term look at Minnesota's climate and thinking about how things have already changed. I do this for two reasons. One is to acknowledge that climate change is already happening, but another is to remind us that we are able to adapt as things change. It's always good to put things into perspective. So based on the data from the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, the State Office of Climatology, they have data dating back to 1895 until about now. When you look statewide and look to see if there is a pattern to what has been happening to our average annual temperatures or our average winter low temperatures or our average summer high temperatures, you can see a trend of warming, regardless of where you are in the state. So the average annual temperature over that time period has increased by about 3 degrees since the late 1800s. But really, I like to include this slide to remind us that change isn't consistent, right? It's very dependent on where you are in the state. And it means that when we think about to our changing weather patterns, really is quite place dependent. So you might have noticed if you're in the more northern portions of the state that our winter recreation activities have been pretty heavily impacted by this change in warming temperatures, whereas our summer temperatures thus far have been less impacted. We've actually seen a little bit of cooling in the southern portion of the state in our summers due to a number of factors that I can talk about after this presentation. But that we see that on average, temperatures have been increasing no matter where you are in the state. We also see a trend of Minnesota getting wetter. So over that same time period, late 1800s to about now, we've seen that on average, annual precipitation has increased by nearly 3 inches. But I always like to remind people that with that increasing precipitation, it doesn't mean that we're getting really consistent nice rains. It means that we're seeing more extremes, so swings between the very wet and the very dry. So here we have a graph looking at total precipitation in June of 2024. Sure, everybody remembers that. The really intense amounts of rain that the various parts of the state were receiving in 9 days. In the southern parts of the state at Mankato, they achieved nearly 10 inches of precipitation. And if we think back a little further, in 2021, we had really severe droughts. And both of these events are kind of emblematic of severe events, even if they may not have cost us personally, even if we weathered the storms ourselves fine, still came at significant cost to our state. So I pulled that. In total, flood events between the 80s until now have cost the state roughly between $5 and $10 billion, and drought events have cost the state between $10 and $20 billion. So again, good to keep in mind that we've seen that these events are increasing, and that we know that, again, even if it doesn't personally affect us, it might affect our neighbors to the south or north of us and still comes at a cost to our whole state. So that's why resilience is so important for thinking about. So what does the future hold for changes to our weather patterns, our climate? I am part of a team at the University of Minnesota that has done some really groundbreaking work on translating climate science for the state of Minnesota. So basically, we have a group of modelers that are able to combine principles of the Earth's physics and biology and pop those into models that help us anticipate how our weather patterns might be changing by the next 10 to 20 years, or even by the end of the century. This is a tool that is free to access that everyone can use, where you can go in and look at how these changes might impact where you live in the future decade or plus decades. And in there, we have a number of variables as they relate to temperature and precipitation. So you can go to that link there. For my presentation, I just pulled a couple of images, but basically what this data from this tool is telling us is that we can continue to expect Minnesota to get warmer, to get wetter, and to see more of these extreme events as time continues. I do have a little bit of a caveat with this information. One is to keep in mind is that when we're talking about changes in the next 10 or 20 years, we're talking about on average. So I can't tell you what, what precipitation in May of 2040 will be precisely. And it also means that not every year will be exactly the same, right? There will be some years where we see more change, some years where things are relatively normal, like this year was a great year, actually. So just as a reminder, we're talking about change in terms of averages, but that doesn't mean that that's what you should plan for every year. And the other thing that I wanted to point out is that, well, I say on average, Minnesota is expected to get wetter, doesn't mean wetter in every season. So we'll take a look at the data, but we can expect wetter when we don't want it, like when we're trying to plant or in the winter, and actually a bit drier when we do want it, like in the summer when our crops are needing that great moisture. So this is a little bit of a busy slide, but I'm going to walk you through it. So this is an example of sort of a range of change that we can expect. So this is what you would find if you go to that tool I was talking about. What I did was look statewide and say, okay, by the 2040 to 2060 timeline, how much difference can we expect from what we experience currently versus by the next 20 years? It splits out this data into a map of where we can expect to see the most significant changes. So again, climate is really dependent on where you are in the state. So on the northern portion of the state, we might see, relatively small increases, but if you're more in the southern to southeast portion of the state, we might see up to, nearly an inch average increase in our springs. And while that doesn't seem like a lot, I would imagine that in spring, when you're trying to plant, nobody would willingly sign up for an extra inch of precipitation on top of what we already get. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that in some cases, we see much more extreme changes by that timeline. So in the northern portion of the state, if we're looking at the maximum possible number of days that we might expect to see that are warmer than 90 degrees, the northern portion of the state is going to be more sheltered from those. But in places like the southern portion of the state, we expect to see more than 2 weeks of those very warm days, which is really not something that we're used to in our state historically, and is one of the biggest changes that we are really going to see dramatic impact from. So again, in thinking about climate change, there's lots of, and changing weather patterns, there's lots of changes that come along with it. A lot of the severity depends on where you are, and that relates to how well you're able to adapt and build resilience to these impacts. So I'm not able to go into super detail onto all of these, but I want to talk a little bit about what wetter, warmer, more extreme might bring for our farm. Some of the negative impacts that we're really going to have to think carefully about to respond and manage to. And I was thinking about for all farms. So we expect to see if we're having more of those really warm days, perhaps warmer nights, increased opportunities for disease and pests from the southern US, even our neighbors directly below us, to sort of creep into Minnesota as they find more suitable conditions. There's risk of reduced yield because of high temperatures or very wet conditions, or not getting precipitation when you need it. There's issues with reduced quality if you're dealing with increased rainfall and are betting on a really nice crop of tomatoes. Obviously, you might have issues of blight or blossom end rot more frequently. And then we can think about these problems more holistically. So if we expect to see droughtier summers, what does that mean for how we're managing water across the state? What does that mean for our risks of erosion and runoff? And most importantly, what does that mean for us as the operators of these projects of our farms? The increased warm temperatures or increased precip can have a bunch of impacts on not just our physical health, but our mental health as well. And so what is our plan for thinking about how we are going to manage more of these events to make sure that we are maintaining our personal resilience? I do always like to point out after I share the big, scary list of what we might expect to see more of, more risks, that there are things that we can do that build resilience. So again, the one that I always start out with that I think can be somewhat overlooked is the importance of building community. Others, especially fellow farmers who are concerned about Minnesota getting wetter, Minnesota getting warmer, so that you have a network of people that you can tap into for strategies, maybe people who have tried out the things that you're interested in and building your resilience, right? Lizzie is going to talk about this more, but armoring our soil to weather more extreme periods of drought or intense precipitation is a big one. We can think about diversification, not just as a strategy to reduce pests and disease impacts, but also as a strategy to diversify our income streams, right? Maybe you're moving to more value-added products. Maybe you're thinking about off-farm jobs. Maybe you're thinking about ways to dip your toe into agro-tourism as an income stream if you're going to be dealing with increased risks of loss of a certain crop. And then maintaining, restoring ecosystems, investing in improvements that increase water access or shade or infrastructure to protect from extremes are all going to be increasingly important. So I gave this big talk about big changes and big problems, right? I recognize that there's a bit of overwhelm, as I said at the beginning of my talk. So one thing that myself and my partners who work on this topic always love to remind people of is that the first step in this is recognizing what you have control and influence over. So you can think about things you have to accept, influence, and control. I've included a list here for you to kind of reflect on which of these you can accept, influence, and control. Maybe you have to accept some of these changing weather patterns, right? We can't control the weather. But you might have influence over market options or if crops grown. You might have influence about where your land or location is. You might be able to control the practices that you're using to respond to these conditions, right? We always recommend that you take it a step further. And we know that we do a lot of value-based planning when we think about other components of the farm. When we're thinking about planning for weather resilience, we always want to remind people that it really starts with thinking about what your core values are, what you really want to protect, what you're okay with adapting to that fits in with your farm's values. The other things that I want to remind us are, again, the data that I showed you is talking about change in terms of average. It's very different from using a forecast, like a 3-day forecast, to make a decision about your farm. So if I was going to use a forecast to make a decision about my farm, they would tell me, if I was a fruit grower, that there's going to be a chance of frost, a significant chance of frost. And I would say, okay, well, I guess I'm going to do my frost protection measures tomorrow night. Climate can't do that, right? In this example, it says that there's likely to be a 50% decrease in frost occurrences by March of 2040. It's not going to help me in determining day-to-day practices, right? But it is really going to help me in those big investments where I want to target my time, my resources, and my money. So if I know that climate change is going to reduce frost occurrences, I might invest in earlier or later blooming varieties so that those are coming online as those changes are becoming more common. Or I might invest my money in some wind machine or frost protection if I know that, again, those are becoming more likely to help me cover and mitigate risk. The last two things that I want to end on are some frameworks for thinking about how we wrap our brains around all this. So Laura Legnick has a great resource called Cultivating Resilience. It's a group that she's put together, and one of their kind of biggest products that they've put out is a framework for helping growers think through this process of building resilience in their operation. One of the things that she recommends starting with is doing essentially a SWOT analysis for these components of your farm. So where are your strengths in production? Where are your weaknesses in marketing or human components of your farm? Where are there opportunities to improve, and what are some threats to those opportunities? And again, how do those align with your value and your vision for a thriving, resilient farm as we're dealing with more increased precipitation in the spring or decreased precipitation in summers or warmer winters, etc. Another framework for thinking about these changes is to think about scenario planning. So this is something that a lot of corporate entities do. I think that Shell was actually the one who really put it on the map, and they started using it in the, I want to say 70s during some oil crises, but it's something that anyone can use. It's a framework that someone can use today as an individual farmer. So what it's essentially doing is having people think through future challenges, right? What happens if my summers are going to be wetter, or excuse me, drier and warmer? What happens if my springs are going to be wetter? What happens if I get less snow and more freezing rain in the winter? And think through actions so that you're prepared to take action rather than just responding to these incidents as they occur. We argue that it helps people feel a bit more prepared for when these things do happen, makes you a bit more able to pivot when these extremes occur or these changes occur. I want to pass it off to Lizzie, and I just want to wrap up with a resource that I wanted to highlight that we're hoping will be helpful to people. The link is in the chat, and it's also on the website. It's our Resilient Farm Planner. This was created largely for corn and bean growers, but a lot of the information in the tool is widely applicable. So what you can do when you use this tool is go into your area of the state. It'll tell you what long-term changes we're expecting to happen in the future, points out some key risks that you might want to be aware of, and then directs people to some strategies that can help build resilience. So I don't have time to get into all of those today, but I'm hoping it's something that you can explore more after this webinar. So with that, I will pass it off to Lizzie to talk more about some of these strategies that can help build resilience, and talk about what NRCS can offer.
Thank you, Katie. That was very comprehensive, and I'm glad you left us with some options for moving forward. And so let's have you can stop sharing, and then I will begin to share with you with Lizzie's. Okay, I have to figure out with Lizzie's slides, and let's see. Very good. Lizzie, you're with us. Thank you. We were going to take a picture of everyone, and I can't tell where everyone is because I'm taking up the whole screen. So I'm going to do my best. Okay, the host has spotlighted your video. Thank you. And there you are, Lizzie. I'm going to have to pass on taking the pictures, everybody. Sorry. So I want to first introduce our partner, Lizzie Dawson, who represents the Minnesota Natural Resources Conservation Service. She is the state tribal liaison and outreach coordinator for Minnesota NRCS, and her career started as a pathway intern in Wisconsin and North Dakota, and then came on full-time after graduating from North Dakota State University, yay, with a Bachelor's of Science in Crop and Weed Science with an emphasis on agronomy and Minnesota plant science and crop production. And so now, with over 10 years of experience with the agency, she's held a variety of roles in the field offices across 3 states. She's passionate about working with historically underserved and urban and small scale producers. Thank you. And building relationships with new customers as they begin their journey with the agency. And well, that is wonderful and so empowering. I'm thrilled. I'm just going to now share my screen so that you can begin to share your information. Now, can you see your slide? Yeah?
There they are. Thank you, Burke.
You're
And
welcome.
everybody for joining today. I am going to go over a handful of practices that help build resiliency on your farm. Katie did a beautiful job of setting all of this up. I will just take a minute that these conservation practices, they can help your farm whether you're experiencing change in family obligations, farm transition, the unexpected weather events that we sometimes have, a change in the market or what customers are demanding, and just an overall any changes. Conservation practices can help you weather that a little bit more smoothly. So Burke, if next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, there's a lot. It's picture heavy, and I promise to try to bring some words with my hoarse voice today. But the number one thing I want to bring up is soil health. Soil health is such a critical tool in so many aspects of farming, gardening, producing food, that it is number one for a reason on my PowerPoint here. So up in the top left corner, we see some corn that's no-tilled into the ground with some soybean stubble or maybe some rye in there. But no-till, reduced tillage is huge for building that soil health. If you're new to the soil health concept, there are 4 main contributing factors for soil health. There's minimizing disturbance, maximizing biodiversity, maximizing soil cover, and then maximizing the living roots. So no-till, reduced tillage, leaving that structure intact is a big one. Then on to the center upper photo, we have some nice cattle grazing, animals, living cover. NRCS can help with a variety of practices. Soil health practices would be that cover crop, helping you transition into a more reduced till system, but also grazing systems. So we can come out to your farm, we can evaluate the carrying capacity of the land, how many animals of what type that you're interested in having, is your land actually able to sustain? And that's important to know. We can also help you develop a seeding plan for a new pasture or help renovate a pasture if it's needing a little extra love. Fencing design, water designs, technical assistance across the board on all those practices, how to move your animals in a way that makes those plants in your pasture just thrive even more and have good nutrition for your animals. The upper right-hand photo, that is a civil pasture. So having trees in your pasture, kind of a forestry practice, kind of a grazing practice. It's really fun to mix the two together. We have experts in the field to help with all these different types of practices. On that lower level of photos, we have a good picture of some cover crops there, some tillage radish, helping to incorporate that biodiversity, the living root, and helping give those soil microbes extra things to munch on in the season when your crops are not growing. And incorporating perennials, or have it in the bottom right there, some alley cropping where you have two or more crops together, whether that be a perennial like hazelnuts or blueberries, or you can get real wild with some of those. But those are some things that we like to work through with you guys and help see what is the best fit for your property. Next slide, please, Burke. Some other things to consider when Katie and I were kind of talking back and forth before the presentations, these were some that she had mentioned to touch on. So irrigation. NRCS can help in both the engineering aspect and identifying what type of irrigation might be a good fit for your property, whether it's a large scale pivot irrigation system, how to control that water, do some zone irrigation. Maybe some parts of your field doesn't need quite as much water as the other, depending on your soil types and things like that, or a micro irrigation system. So how that's laid out, how that fits into your operation, what's the need of your crops, and how the soil influences that. But irrigation wells and different things, all around irrigation, making sure the water gets to the right place at the right time. If we don't get it from the sky, we can get it from other places. Diversification. So whether that is diversifying your crops that you grow, the variety, as Katie had mentioned, or just diversification in general. There's a couple really great webinars that MNWiC has done previously on forest farming and different forestry practices. A lot of farms have those wooded areas. We sometimes call them associated ag areas in NRCS world that we don't really know what to do with. There's a good use that you can always put to that. So diversification of income streams, produce, if you want to start growing some berries or things like that, NRCS can help with technical assistance again. There's also financial components that we can hopefully help give a little money towards that situation. And then controlling the drainage. So whether that be you have some erosion already happening on your property, we can identify where there's erosion happening that you might not be able to see with your eye. So sheet and rail erosion. Any place that is bare soil or doesn't have something growing is susceptible to having it erode, even on a small slope. So things like grass waterways, and then water and control sediment basins. If you have a big field with some pretty extensive erosion, there are different ideas that we have that we can assist with the engineering design. We have engineers on staff that is all free to our producers. Also putting gutters on buildings on the farmstead, controlling where that clean water goes, not letting it go over where the animal manure is and things of that nature, keeping the clean water clean. Rain barrels, things like that. All right, next slide, Burke, please. This is a doozy. So there's a lot of resources here. We're going to take a couple minutes to go through some of them, but I wanted to go over them quick and then we'll dive deep. So the Field Office Tech Guide, if you have a hankering to know the standards and specifications of a specific practice, if you're curious about alley cropping and you want to go in there, if you really want to dig into some cover crop fun, or nutrient management, that's a big one. You are welcome to go onto the website for the Field Office Tech Guide. It is open to the public. It can be a little overwhelming. There's a lot of information. That's where NRCS employees get our documents that we fill out, and some of the guidance for that. So again, open to the public. We'd love for you to poke around. But if you're dipping your toes in a little bit and you don't want to dive into the deep end, the Minnesota NRCS YouTube site has a lot of videos of practices from across the state, whether it's soil health practices, there's some bison grazing, tillage, all sorts of things that there are videos, and there are like playlists that one of our interns a couple of years ago was kind enough to put together for us. So you could click on the soil health ones, or you can click on High Tunnel or something like that, and you can watch those. There are longer videos that are about 20, 30 minutes long. There are shorter bite-sized ones. They're more scroll friendly, if you will, that you are welcome to experience. There are some SARE books listed there. I have a handful of them personally, but some really good resources for learning about cover crops, managing weeds, building soils, all that good stuff. And then we do have some partner websites. So we have a university extension one that Katie is quite familiar with as well. The Irrigator Pocket Guide, drought maps, Minnesota has an irrigation program. And then Pheasants Forever does some work with precision ag and conservation as well. So if we maybe want to, well, let's start with the YouTube videos, and then Katie and I we'll take to the crop production website, if that's all right, Burke.
Do you mean this site, the crop production, the podcast videos? Click.
If we maybe start with the YouTube, the Minnesota NRCS YouTube, that one will that can be a little quicker.
This
and
one?
then we'll go into the podcast, the second one on the list.
Second one on the left, which, I'm sorry, are we talking about this one? My left?
At the very top, just under the Field Office Tech Guide.
Oh, okay. Field Office Tech Guide. Here we go.
And then the one right under there.
Oh, you mean in the link? Hold on. I'm sorry. Here. Okay.
Yes. Yep.
I thought I was there. Yeah. And so is there a particular one you want me to hit?
It hasn't quite changed. It was more just going to kind of show what the format looks like and where to find some of the playlists.
Okay.
But if it hasn't changed on your screen, we can go into the crop production website and go to the podcast.
Okay. Sorry, that hasn't changed. So here we go. There's so many resources. It's great to have guidance to negotiate your way into it. Let's see. We want to field crops. Let's see. This is.
I think maybe you have to stop sharing the presentation.
Would you say that again, please?
We're still seeing the slides. So I think you have to stop sharing.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're seeing your slides. You're not seeing the screen that I'm bringing. I didn't know that. What the heck happened? Okay, let's see.
Hey, Burke, this is Maddy.
Yeah.
I believe if you stop sharing your screen right now, then when you go to share again, you can select that specific web page is what you want to be sharing.
Thank you.
So give that a go and see if that helps.
Thanks, Maddy.
Yeah.
Okie dokie, here we are. Can you see this?
Mhm.
What?
Yes, we're good.
Yes, okay. And so this is on the extension site for crops, podcasts, and videos. But I didn't know you weren't seeing any of the links I had opened up. You hadn't seen any of those? Oh dear. Okay, let's just go back here for a second. Do you see this?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, this is your field office technical guide.
Yes. So section 4 is where
Section
you'll
4.
find the conservation practices
Okay.
and supporting documents. And that's, yep, that one right there. So you can scroll through there, select any of them that you want to dig deeper into.
Wow, okay.
There's a lot. There's a
There's
lot
a
that we
lot.
offer.
Alphabetical order, at least. It's
That's
not
helpful.
really- Okay, and so shall we go to another link?
Yes.
Okay, so here's the YouTube link
Perfect.
that I thought you were seeing, and there's such a treasure trove of videos and a playlist here. It's fantastic resources. You don't know what you don't know. And here we have, now if I go back, this is the front page of crop production with extension with the link that we've provided. And then we can just click on podcasts and videos. And again, there's just like tremendous content here as well. So I was just looking at the field crop section and look at how many. They're generally about 25 to 30 minutes each. So would you like to show any more of these links, or shall we open up to questions because we only have about 10 minutes left? Yeah, okay, I'm going to.
Questions would be great.
Thank you. This has been amazing. I would like to open up and take a group photo, if I may. And okay, I'm going to see if I can do this. Oops. Then the group photo, where'd it go? Here we are. We're going to take the photo. If you could come off of or turn your videos on, everyone, for just a brief minute or two for me to take this picture, we would allow it. That'd be great. Okay, why am I here? I don't want to be. Okay. Oh, ready, steady, go. Allow. There's the picture. Thank you. Group photo. I'm going to do it again. Okay. Thank you. Terrific. So we have Katie and Lizzie available. Thank you, Jill, for the cheer. And we'd like to open it up for questions. And I'm assuming that you've put your questions in the chat. Noreen, can you help facilitate that?
Yep, absolutely. You're monitoring that. Maybe if too, we can have Lizzie explain NRCS, where do I find my office? Is that federal? You know, where would I go for something like that or look that up? And do I have to be a farmer to use that?
Thank you for that question. So the last slide on my presentation that we didn't quite look at. So if we do share the slides, there is a link to find your local field office. There is one in almost every county. If you don't have one in your specific county, it's a shared management. So you can use that as a guide. You're welcome to reach out to me as well, and I can connect you to that office. If you're not it doesn't have to be a landowner. You can be a producer, anybody looking for some conservation. If you fall into the category of not a farmer and you don't own land, I encourage you to reach out to me, and I'd be happy, or one of the MNWiC area coordinators, and we can help assist you in some of your conservation desires.
I put the link in the chat, Lizzie, that you had in your last slide. Sorry, we didn't get to your last slide.
Thank you, Burke.
Sure.
Yes, that was the only thing on the last slide. So that's perfect.
Okay. And Katie, some of the resources too, just even as a gardener, we question is there something they can do? Maybe get seeds that are more tougher or seeds that are appropriate, more hardy. Any recommendations?
So I am looking, I will drop it in the chat. Actually, the U of M Master Gardeners program has recently developed sort of climate gardening under climate change class. So I'm trying to see if I can find that. That is a really great resource. Another thing I would say, yes, seed varieties are great. Obviously talk with your trusted seed person about what varieties might be suitable. There's been I know there is a lot of work currently on thinking about adapted breeds that maybe are from more southern zones. Obviously, I'm sure that you're aware of the plant hardiness zones changing. So just keeping on top of that information is great. And then I would say, I think a lot of the same principles for gardeners apply as they do for farmers. So making sure your pest management is in order, thinking about ways that you can enhance natural ecosystems, think about water management in a sustainable way for your garden are all really good, just a handful of the good protocols to follow as well. But I'm dropping that link to this course in the chat.
Okay, and we also, this is recorded, so we'll be posting this probably in a couple of weeks. So you're like, now what did Katie say? You know, what did Lizzie say about that? I can't remember. You can go back and listen anytime, 24/7, listen to it a couple of times, share with friends. So don't panic if you can't remember it all. It's a lot of data to remember. So go to our MNWiC for events as well, because we're going to be rolling out some great events and learning circles. So just a kudos to you both. And also your contact information, Katie, do we have that in Lizzie? Do we have that in the, okay, that would be great to have. Is there also an easy way to start, Lizzie, with maybe I want to try cover crops, but I'm not feeling very confident. Is there kind of a step one that you would suggest?
In a lot of ways, we suggest starting with a species that will not carry over the winter. So whether it's some rye, not the winter rye, because that one will carry over. But turnips, radishes, those sorts of things, those will all die off in the winter. Starting with one species, though, is a good thing to do. If you have a larger area, just start with a little piece. You don't have to do the whole thing at one time. But contacting NRCS for planting recommendations when you should plant them. There are certain windows for them to be most beneficial. Some seeds need a little extra time to grow and get out of the ground. Some need warmer temperatures and things like that. So taking it slow, doing a little piece. It will take a couple of years for you to see some of that soil health benefit of the cover crops, of the reduced tillage, of that sort of a thing. So just don't lose hope. It's coming. Know you're feeding those happy little microbes in the soil and building a good structure.
And this one too, Lizzie, you could probably help with. What if I'm a church group or a nonprofit, or I'm the city of Moorhead, where one of our sheroes in Moorhead is doing a park, a pollinator park, Martha Wheeler, we adore. But can you tell us, can we apply for NRCS and can we get help with conservation plans?
I encourage you are welcome to contact your local office. Always you're welcome to contact your local office, especially those church groups, nonprofits, things like that. If you feel like you fall into kind of a different category, you're more than welcome to reach out to me. I can facilitate conversations with the field office. I get to specialize in some of those less traditional applicants and things of that nature. So happy to have you come reach out to me.
Perfect. And also sometimes even working with maybe your farmer, a local farmer, because I know we probably spill enough seed to give everyone out there when we're loading with cover. So sometimes even tapping that local farm that is into cover crops can be really helpful too.
I was going to add to that. Lizzie would tell this if you met with her, but SWCDs also have a lot of cost share programs for cover crops in particular. So your NRCS person or SWCD person would be able to tell you about those opportunities.
Soil and Water District, you mean?
Yes,
Not everybody knows those acronyms, but you know, I was under the impression that there is a requirement that you have to have so much acreage in order to approach NRCS, or you don't? No.
No acreage minimums.
No acreage minimums. Okay, that's
fantastic. Plus, you can layer, the different programs to make the incentive a little bit more, because the state legislature just approved that. And so you can do a 1-year contract, just baby steps, and you can do a 3-year. But then you can, if you get a federal contract, you can layer them so it helps with cost share. Because it is, a lot of the farmers will say right to you is, does this really pay? I'm sure you've all heard that a million times. So long term it does. So it's, maybe you guys can address that.
Yes. So NRCS's cost share, it is a way for a farmer to try the practice, and hopefully we're able to help get you hooked on it. So the intent is not to be able to pay for it long term for forever and ever, but to help get those initial results established so that you can see the value in it in a practice like cover crops. In your local office, a lot of the soil and water conservation districts are co-located with NRCS. So sometimes you may not know who answers the door or who answers the phone. Sometimes they share a reception person. And they're very good about knowing each other's deadlines. If you call at a certain time in NRCS, we accept applications year-round, but we do have cutoff dates for funding, for ranking applications and selecting them. The soil and water conservation, districts are a little bit more flexible. They are able to accept applications a little bit later into the season, where NRCS would already be planning for the next year for funding. These are all things that you wouldn't need to know. That's the beauty of your local office and building that relationship with your local people so that they can help navigate and try to find spots where this all works out.
Thank you.
Well, we've reached 1 o'clock. It's been really compelling and interesting, and I appreciate both of your presentations, and I certainly am grateful to Noreen and Maddy for helping to produce this webinar. And Lizzie, thanks for giving this a shot with that sore throat and cold that you're dealing with. We can all appreciate that. Noreen, just give a quick minute boost about the October beekeeping webinar, would you? And thank you all for joining us. But if you just give us that final note.
Sure. Our Wednesday webinar is going to be on honeybees. You're interested in honeybees, you don't know anything or you know a lot. It's going to be fabulous. We have 2 experts from Moorhead, actually, Fargo-Moorhead, and they run the Red River Valley Bee Association. So you can ask them those tough questions about how does this impact natural bees that are there all the time. These women are amazing, and we filled the room. So don't miss it, because even if you're a honey connoisseur in your tea, you want to hear about this.
Thank you so much, Noreen. So thank you again, Katie and Lizzie. Really appreciated it. Thank you all for joining us. Hope to see you next month.